Okay, welcome everybody to the Community Engagement Commission meeting Wednesday, October the 18th, 2023. I'm going to call to order the meeting. Roll call, Commissioners, Aaron Asman.
Here.
Summer Darrow. Here. Cynthia Godinez. Here. Bill Norman.
Here.
And I'd like to ask for an excuse, or I'm going to excuse Mark Sala, seems like he's gone. And Jennifer Kosaka, I have not heard from, so we will continue without her. For the agenda, any changes, revisions, or modifications? None? Approving. Anything to the minutes of September 20th, 2023 minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second. All in
Seconded
favor?
by
Summer.
Favor.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None, motion carries. Are there any public comments, audience or online?
Nope.
Perfect. City Hall updates. So we have our City Hall updates, and this is something that David's been providing us. I think the thing that we need to make note is that me, Jennifer, Cynthia, and Mark are basically odd number terms, and we're going to expire at the end of December.
Your terms will expire.
Yeah, okay, let me put that. Who knows, maybe I'll expire by then too.
That's really fair.
So our terms will expire, so. And talking with David, we just need to fill out on the webpage, there's a link in the application form. When do we have to have that filled out again? Right?
Ideally, as soon as possible.
Okay,
The term expires December 31st.
31st.
Yeah, so sometime within the next month or so, I would say.
His city council has to approve it again, right?
Correct.
so they would need to approve it by December then.
Do they approve it at the December meeting or first meeting in January?
There's no hard and fast rule. I mean, we would try to do everything we could to get that on the agenda the last meeting in December, but if it goes to the first one in January, we're okay.
And just as standard procedure, the city will publicly open up, notice that positions are expiring to the general public. Don't take that as a threat, anybody. We're trying to replace anybody. It's just what normally happens with all commissions and boards, et cetera. Don't get worried when you see solicitations on Facebook.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, she just said she was gonna expire and she was fine with that, so.
well, we have to make a few jokes here. We have to make this fun, right? Okay. So anything else worth noting on the handouts?
And I guess I would also just like to encourage anybody, if you've not done so already, I know Bill has signed up today, but City Academy, fall version starts tomorrow at Trailhead Golf Course. Cynthia was attending last year, and if there was something you missed last spring, look at the schedule. Please pop in if you'd like to fill in on what you missed out, and this is open to any of you or your contacts who you think you could benefit from this.
I just an observation on the webpage. If you go to the alert, it tells you that it's starting. And at the bottom is a link that takes you to Eventbrite, or should. If the link isn't active,
That's a fault of the particular feature.
Okay,
I was trying to get it to link and whatnot, but
I'm sure people can figure that out, I did, which is that litmus test.
So I thought one thing worth noting, when we did those surveys on the unfunded proposed projects, and we got 337 completed online responses. And I thought that that was a good number compared, I think, to our other survey that we had done, we got 25. Did you count the ones that were handed in, by any chance? Were you able to?
I've noted that on the report. It was like 30 additional paper ballots.
Oh, there it
Plus,
was,
plus if there were any
30 additional.
handed in at farmer's market, I don't know if there were.
Yes, there were.
Okay.
There was quite a collection.
So I haven't added those yet.
Okay. So I was pleased with that. With that, I'd like to move forward and ask Aaron, this is Aaron's initiative and discussion on framework and process for projects.
Yeah, so, at our last meeting, we, mentioned that we should probably start, putting together some documented process for us to help follow. Not just for us as a commission, but also for us to have conversations with city leadership, city council, other commissions that are out there, the residents at large, you know, whatever the case might be. So I've drafted this document. This is really meant truly to be a starting place. I think there's several pieces that we can build upon within this document. From here, just so you can kind of understand where my head's going, you know, we'll have, once we have the kind of written process developed to a point where everybody's kind of comfortable with it, I'll take that document, build out a couple of flow diagrams for consumption, both for us as a commission, but then also to present to city council and city management, so that we can get their buy-in and feedback on, you know, what are we missing, what other topics do we need to potentially include, that kind of stuff. So we'll have basically two sets of documents that will eventually be created. So this is really just meant to be an initial template and a starting place. We'll build off of that. And then once we go to city leadership with something more formal and city council with something more formal, we'll have a little bit more meat to go with it, so to speak. Not just the written process, but also a physical, a more visual process, so that, you know, both learners, visual and audio, can benefit from having something tactile in their hands that will walk through. Some of the pieces I mentioned in here touch on looking at statistically valid sample sizes and what that looks like. So we'll touch on that a little bit. But I'll kind of walk through this a little bit. I don't want to read it word for word necessarily, but I'll kind of walk through it. So the general kind of initial introduction to this is, you know, looking at us as the CEC as a mechanism to support staff, council, residents on gathering meaningful information to assist in decision making. I felt like that was clear within the ordinance that was created, and then also clear within the subsequent city council conversations that we've had, as far as us being able to be kind of that conduit and helping facilitate that process. Moving kind of out of that kind of introductory thing, looking at the process for vetting ideas, looking at ideas and areas of concern which lead to a community engagement project start with an initial summary or proposal for consideration. So really looking at saying, okay, so going back to like the dog park idea, because that's probably the easiest one to kind of reference, right? Okay, so taking that initial input of information from the two primary constituents that came forward, having them, which they kind of did, develop some sort of proposal saying, hey, this is what we want to talk about, this is why. And then for us as a commission to be able to validate it based on, you know, for them to be able to provide some additional information. So they should be providing not just what the project or the idea is, but looking at their intended goal, what are they trying to get out of it? Whatever that might be, looking at the prospective target audience, who do they think it's gonna serve? What's their timeline for execution? What do they see us as CEC being able to help from an execution standpoint? We can take that initial summary, or proposal, review it at our CEC meetings, look at it, and discuss it and see how valid it is for something to potentially move forward on. Looking at to evaluate it based on a couple of primary criterias, which are, looking at alignment with current city management or city council priorities. So that's obviously, hey, it's on city councils and city management's, top of the list of things to do. Obviously, then it should probably rise to the top of things that we should find a way to support. Volume of city citizens / community responses supporting the proposal. So that kind of goes a little bit outside of goes into the kind of the bucket of things that might not be priority, but if we're getting a significant number of citizens reaching out about this, okay, so maybe we should investigate it further and figure out what path to potentially move that down. It's an area of need to improve community engagement, and also alignment with other city commissions, projects, and priorities. So, we've got Parks and Arts, primarily Parks and Arts would probably be the ones that we would likely engage with on something. So if it's one of their priorities and something coming forward to us, how we go about vetting, how we go about supporting that initial project. Putting in the caveat that, the areas that I've identified are not intended to be all encompassing, but to help guide the decision-making process. So while I put in a couple of bullets, and we can obviously add a couple more, trying to keep the criteria for review somewhat simple, but then also not being self-limiting either. So there's gonna be things that are gonna fall out of the box, so to speak, no matter what we create. So trying to have a process that's flexible and nimble enough, with still enough structure, which is always the fun part. So enough structure, but still being flexible enough to accommodate things that are kind of outside the potential norm. So assuming we accept whatever proposal or summary, moving on to the next page. Now we've got it in our hands. And we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna move forward with it. Starbucks subcommittee. So we need to identify some sort of subcommittee to then take the lead on. So that way the CEC as a whole isn't necessarily on a project. So let's just look, again, using the dog park as an example. So we're not all working on, we're taking 2 members of our CEC commission and saying, hey, you 2 are gonna go run with that. Because we've got 2 other commission members that are working on another project and being able to help spearhead multiple things without overloading one or multiple individual council members or commission members. So identifying a subcommittee that's going to work on it, and then starting to build out kind of a project plan, so that we can identify, what are the overall goals, what's our timeline of execution for us as a commission, looking at key stakeholders, and that could include city staff, city council, business members, could be a variety of different things, identifying process for evaluation and analysis of the results, and then what that process for serving the community is going to look like. So we're going to kind of build that project plan, review the project plan. So the subcommittee is going to kind of build it. It's going to come back to the CEC as at a larger level, review it, say, okay, hey, what else is we missing? So our subcommittee brings it back and says, hey, this is what we developed. Commission as a whole, what are we missing? Develop it further. And then at that next stage is then, depending on what it is, so if it's like a city council or city staff, priority list item. Now that we've got something kind of well baked, let's go to city staff and city leadership and city council and say, okay, we've worked through this process. It's a priority item. Here's kind of the proposed project timeline and how we think we can help, and then we can kind of work on engaging city staff on kind of gather feedback. What are we missing? How do we do it better, et cetera. And then again, kind of working within that framework, especially if it is part of the city staff and council priorities, making sure that, goals make sense on both ends, and then kind of going through that process of executing a survey. and gathering those results as they present themselves. Looking at statistically relevant sample sizes and populations, that was, I know, a comment that came up in the city council meeting a couple months back. So I tried to provide some parameters for which I think makes sense for us to be able to look at statistically valid sample sizes. for our
Can
community.
I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
If we, I mean, we have a population of what? We say-
12,000
Well,
Yeah.
and one.
Can we imagine, any question that we wouldn't want to at least reach out to everybody?
Oh, you mean, well, let me get, I'll get to that.
If the valid sample size is the answer to the question, did we get enough responses?
Mhm.
That's different than how many people do we need to send this to have a valid survey? I just wonder if the assumption isn't always that we want to get to everybody that we can.
Right.
reach.
No, and so in going through this process, it identifies very quickly that that's not necessary and then not also realistic. Like, I mean, so if we have a population of 12,000 people.
Right.
And we say, okay, well, we want to get to everybody. Nobody gets to everybody. Right.
Got it.
Right. So then we got to go, okay, well, what makes it statistically relevant, depending on the topic? What makes it statistically relevant to be able to make decisions off of? And so that kind of goes into on the next page, there's that little chart.
Yeah.
For us to kind of help guide that process. So I did some additional research to be able to find this. So this isn't me just pulling things out of thin air, but did some additional research from different research companies that kind of look at different things and kind of where the different, what makes sense, whether you're looking at trying to conduct scientific research or whether you're trying to conduct statistically valid surveys, two different things. So that was kind of helpful in at least the discovery process. One of the key points that I kind of looked at was, okay, well, we have a population of 12,000 people. If you actually look at the population breakdown of over 18, I thought that was an extremely important number. So 68% of our residents are over 18. So while we have a population of 12,000 people, the number of people that could potentially take a survey is not 12,000. It's 8,160 voting age people, 18 plus, that are likely to take a survey or participate. So when we look at it in the context of how big is our pie isn't 12,000. And I think that's important to understand, unless we're expecting school kids, high school and under, to be taking the service, which I don't think is the expectation from city staff, correct me if I'm wrong, or city council, that we're gonna have those individuals participating. With these types of discussions. And for the most part, aside from some of the high school engagement things that have been happening, which is gonna be such a small pool, it's not gonna move the needle one way or the other.
Like a barefoot in the park, that would be all ages.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The other number that I felt like was important to call out, so while 8,100, give or take, are 18 plus, the other population estimate that I felt like was also important was residents 65 plus, so that's 1,500-ish residents. Approximately 13% of our population is 65 plus, which, to be honest with you, in looking at the data, I was surprised it was that small. I expected that population to be bigger. And I think it has been in the past, but I think that's all for the demographics within the community starting to change. So, I think it's important to note that when we're looking at what types of responses we're looking for based on the types of surveys and information we're trying to gather. So it's because if we're asking questions that are not pertinent to those residents, the likelihood of them responding goes down, right? So if we're asking residents about I know we're in Catholic, but let's just say we're asking residents about putting in a new skate park, right? How many residents 65 plus, so that 1,500 people, are likely to respond or take the time to respond to that survey. Probably not many, some will, because they may be like, oh, we already have one, we don't need it, but the chances diminish because it's not a resource that they would likely participate in, right? You know, that's human nature, as far as responding to things. So I think it's important to understand the demographics of the population and where things split out. As we venture down the path of looking at very specific surveys, the broader surveys, obviously, like we're looking at talking about the city's strategic plan for the next 5 years. That's very different because that's going to impact residents on all age spectrums, right? You know, from those with families and young kids to, you know, the residents that are 65 plus. So it's gonna definitely touch all, you know, all residents within the city. Anyway, so moving on to kind of the next piece, or if you move over to the next page, it's just, that's the census.gov information, for a reference. Our population, based on their estimates, is growing about 5.4% per year, based on census.gov. I know the city has different data showing something different. But that's based on their information and then shows some of that additional breakdown. We can go deeper than this as far as looking at, you know, age or wage demographics and that kind of stuff. I think for the most part, not necessarily pertinent for most of what we would survey on, but it would definitely be something that if you really wanted to get, go down a rabbit hole, we definitely could. Anyway, so that kind of helps look at it from, so again, going back to statistically valid sample sizes. In general, if we look at, there's a couple different kind of growth benchmarks you can look at. For a general survey, the general thought process is if you can reach 10% of your overall population, that would generate a reasonably valid sample size for a response. Okay. The table down below helps define that a little bit further, and that really helps give us a margin of error that's likely to take place based on the size of the population that we're looking at and what margin of error are you comfortable. So if we go back to the survey that was just done, right? So we've got 337 responses. I'm just going to go with that gross number. So you got 337 responses. So 337 people responded, right? So just go with that number. And if we look at that and we say there are, again, looking at that percentage of people that are 18 plus, so we're in that 8,000 range of total number of people, we're at approximately a 5% margin of error. So if you use that table, we've got greater than 5,000 residents, we've got a margin of error that's going to be at least 5%, plus or minus. So it kind of gives you an idea of going, okay, well, if 87% of the people are saying yes, well, it could be 92 or it could be 80. Right, so that's your margin of error, at least within that threshold. So the more, the higher the responses, and the larger number of the responses that you get, obviously, the margin of error is going to go down because you're getting you're getting a deeper level of responses. The question that you really have to look at though too is if we're going to eliminate it based on IP address, which that eliminates, that's a household response. It's not an individual response. Because you could have, you know, husband and wife sitting in the same room and using the same computer, and they're both submitting that survey. You're eliminating one of their responses because they're coming from the same IP address. Okay, so that's a household response, not a population response. That's the other question that we have to ask is what are you trying to actually have a response of? Are you looking at just the number of people that can respond, or are you truly looking at the individual households that respond? So the number of households is 4,000. Talk about 4,000 households. That changes the dynamics greatly as far as our error rate or margin error within the survey. So those are the different things to consider and keep in mind. And then also for city council, when they're trying to understand how valid is this sample size? Because how many responses did we get on that first one? The first one,
Which one?
what was the first survey we did? Not
The strategic plan.
the strategic plan, wasn't that like 700?
600 plus.
600 plus.
650.
So if you figure 650. And we're somewhere between 3% and 5% if you're talking the number of people on a margin of error rate. That's pretty good and a decent sample size based on the available population that could respond, which is that 8,000 number. We're pretty close to that 10%. So again, it can give that validity because I think having a low number of responses or what could be perceived as a low number of responses from city council and even in the community in general, would be like, only 600 people responded. Be like, well, that's actually what we're trying to get to. Anywhere between 600 to 800 people if we're talking about people. If we're talking about households, hey, we're only trying to reach 400 households to respond. The question then comes, are we actually getting them from a diverse enough demographic, from different areas that it's actually giving us a valid sample size? Because is it, out of those 600 responses, if we do the age demographic split, if 80% of it is skewed into one category or the other, and it doesn't represent the age demographics of the community to the same level that they are, it doesn't give us as meaningful of information as if we're getting, if we're getting 60 or 70% of the population that's between 18 and 64, those are the ones that are responding, and that's 70% of our responses. And then we got the other 13% are residents 65 plus. If we're reaching those, kind of target threshold numbers, then we're reaching the population in a way that makes sense. But if we're skewed one way or the other, if we're getting all responses 65 plus in that age demographic, then it's not actually representing the community. It's representing a section of the community, but it's not representative of the community as a whole. That makes sense. So anyway, things to be aware of, and I feel like it was important to include that because I know it was a hot topic that came up.
Yeah, it was. I think on the two World City Council meetings too, like with the strategic plan survey, the thing. When the city council members was exactly talking about that and statistically, and the survey we did, it wasn't statistical, we just get, and so.
Yeah, and then I think it's important to have, what this can help do is level set expectations across the board.
Yeah,
So, hey, as CDC, what's our expectation as far as the number of responses that we're gonna get for a survey that's gonna impact all of the residents? Okay, this is our goal number. The goal number isn't 10,000 responses, our goal number is X. And that gives us a statistically valid sample size, so that we as CDC, city staff, don't have this expectation put on them that, hey, why aren't we having 12,000 of the residents all respond? Well, that's not while we would love that, that's also not the goal. The goal is to get a valid sample size to be able to make decisions off of. We would love everybody to respond to it, but we know that's not realistic. And this gives a framework to be able to not only have those expectations set, but then also be able to make decisions off of that data that comes in because we know it's valid and we know that it represents the community as a whole. But I think when we look at those different sections of the community, not just geographically, but then also from an age standpoint, that is important to understand that representative sample size. It's because again, if we're skewed one demographic one way or the other, it doesn't give that full picture. Right. All right. Any questions? Then I'll go to the backing.
I think one thing that occurs to me as we try to also measure the demographic source of the responses we get is balancing ease and transparency with complexity and intrusiveness.
Yeah.
When you respond to those. How much do I want to tell you about who I am?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's always one of the hardest things within surveys is because you don't want to be intrusive. You want people to respond honestly and you don't want to have there be bias in not just the questions that you're asking, but the wording of the questions to be leading. right? So we don't, and that's I feel like in all the surveys I've done and worked on, that's the hardest thing is removing your personal bias in writing the question. Cause you're writing something, it's you, it's your voice, but you have to write it in a way that doesn't have those biases move in, doesn't create a leading question to answer it in the way that I want you to, right? Whether, not intentional, but I mean, all surveys are created in a way that, you know, it's okay, we're trying to get an answer to something. We're trying to solve a problem, the 5-year plan, we're trying to figure out what residents want, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. But we can easily, within the survey questions themselves, craft them in a way that guides them in the path that we want to go, not necessarily the way that, and unintentionally. And that's, I feel like crafting survey questions is one of the hardest things, to get the words right, so that A, it's simple, it's quick, it allows for easy decision making on the respondent's end, but doesn't have any information bias actually put into it as well.
I think another thing we have to put out for, on Mr. London surveys too, is just the ease at which they can get done. So that they want to, that people will just easily do that, picking out those techniques, means and methods, and how best we can. It was interesting on I've said this too, little seminar yesterday, and looking at different ways of getting that information, but also using different means and methods too, without just doing a survey type of check the box, so that people don't get burnt out.
On the numbers, I would also argue that our number goes down until we have mailers. So if anyone wants to comment on how, right?
Yeah.
We haven't reached those 42, we haven't reached that number of households, right? So even our sample size kind of goes down, and our number is more impressive if we've only, if we haven't actually reached out to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, that in particular, especially reaching people as much as things have changed on the social media landscape, I would agree with you. I think our numbers on the number of responses is really impressive, not having some other more traditional means of connecting with people. I think the numbers are great. 300 and some responses with the survey that's out there right now. That's awesome. And still got 2 weeks left. Probably get 400 by the end of the month. That's really good. As far as the number of responses. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think and then the piece that goes with that too, and I think that's part of the goal setting process on the front end of this, is setting expectations based on what that survey is intended to be about, right? So again, if we're surveying something that's very niche and only going to reach a small target, is likely something that's going to only impact a small target number of people within the community. The expectation of having a 10% population response isn't realistic if it's so narrowly focused, versus something as broad as the 5-year plan, likely to have more engagement around that than something that's very, singular in its focus.
But then if it is narrowly focused in a community of our size, you might not even need us. You can call people and say, you want.
Yeah, well, I think it also changes.
There's some threshold
Yeah,
below which it doesn't even make any sense for us.
and I think there's, I think it changes to the process in which you try and reach that target audience. I think, something as broad as a strategic plan, blanket, things that are dropped out there that are going to easily touch all the residents of the community is an easy way to do it. Something, it's a dinner table topic, so to speak. Anybody, remotely engaged in what's going on within the government know that this happens on a regular basis. They want to see the community do better, do more, whatever the case is, and are going to engage in that, versus, the dog park project is a great example of that again, which is not everybody is going to jump on You know, as much as it isn't, it's not as much of a dinner table topic, so to speak. It's more of a niche topic and how we go about gathering those surveys. Again, going back to statistically valid sample sizes so that the data is not skewed. Right, because that was the feedback that we got with the trailhead thing. It was like, well, it's skewed because of how the questions were asked. Well, we didn't really have time to put much together on that
Yeah.
one. It was kind of a
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, just go do, but it gave us great learnings on how to do things differently. And how to make sure that we're reaching, and again, it goes back to making, are we reaching a broad enough cross-section of community to gather data and analyze that data so that city staff, city council, can make informed decisions based on what the community is actually saying the need is and what their desires are for where the city's going.
But you made a good point too, Aaron, and I like that when you said, hey, what are we looking for with our expectations? Is it individual or for household? Because I got asked that question. Quite a bit between the farmer's market and the Friends of the Library. Well, is it household or can my, me, my husband and my kids do this?
Yeah.
So I just made, and I said, per person.
Yeah. Well, and that's where it gets challenging too, because if you get, I mean,
It does.
there's a lot of households that have, I mean, not just, married partners, right? But they might have kids who are 18 and voting age. And they have very different views potentially than
Yeah.
what their parents think. And so, again, if we go down the path of household and understanding why, because there's a reason to do that. It's not like that's not a good thing, but there's a reason to do that, but that's the limitation. If you start going down that path of saying, hey, there's gonna be not necessarily duplicated responses, but responses coming from that same place that are different. That one's gonna get pulled out and not actually included. And that's,
Yeah.
there's no perfect answer, that's the other problem, there's no,
There's no.
it's
yeah.
just, you gotta figure out which direction do you wanna go, what are you comfortable leaving in or taking out? And then making sure that that's noted as far as how, what the process was for gathering and pulling the information together.
And so some of the things I found out too, when we were doing the survey work was when some, and I didn't realize this, but sometimes married couples have the same email, they use the same email, but they want to take the survey, but then they weren't allowed because it had the same email.
Same email address, yeah. There's always one exception that's floating out there that goes,
But actually that happened
more often, I know.
than what
yeah.
I even realized, because I didn't even realize that, of course,
Yeah.
between my husband and me are each separate, so we could do our own surveys,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of broadly, the piece on the data side of things. On the back, on the last page, I kind of talked about what to do with proposals that are not part of the city's current strategic plans and priorities, as well as kind of analyzing the data and that review process. And honestly, I feel like that's one piece we could be helpful, especially if we're developing things on the front end and saying, okay, proposals are coming in, we're developing project plans and goals and working with city staff and or city council or other commissions. We could be part of that process of analyzing the data because we kind of have an idea as far as what those goals and those benchmarks should be and what they should look like and build some templates to be able to support that. And then we can put those presentations together for, whatever, appropriate audience that might be, whether it's, hey, we need to present it to city staff, we need to present it to council, we're gonna present it back to the commission that we're working with, whatever the case may be, then we can actually start going down that process of doing so. I think the things that fall kind of outside of the strategic priorities plans, again, it kind of creates that, I don't want to say a loophole, but an area of gray where it's going, okay, obviously things that are part of the city's strategic plan or the priority list, the things that council have identified or other commissions have already identified would be, in my opinion, at least from a consideration standpoint, things that would rise to the top. but there may be things that are gonna fall outside of that bucket. And so I still think they should be reviewed based on the merits and saying, okay, John Doe citizen comes in with a really good idea of something that we should, reach out to the constituents on. He's got, letters of support from local businesses, let's say, and all this other stuff. They're like, okay, well, we should take that into consideration, figure out whether we as a CEC, whether it makes sense. And then go down that process of going, okay, is it something that's already on, it might be on city staff's radar, but not part of priority list. And so how do we engage that in a conversation and where does that lead? So the process, I think, from initial proposal or idea from the city resident, or other commission or even city council potentially, while the process on the back end would look different, I think the initial proposal and summary and kind of what we would want to see from them on the beginning would help guide us in that kind of discussion phase. But I feel like that for things that are not part of those kind of already identified priority lists, those would be the ones that would be require more discussion to figure out what makes sense as far as how to move them forward, and whether to move them forward. Because it may be something that, hey, it's a great idea, we love it, but we're gonna put it in a box, we're gonna set it over here, and we're gonna look at it in 6 months because we already know there's something coming down the pipe that might impact this. And so, trying to figure out how to navigate that process, and making sure that that makes sense for everybody. Anyway, so broad process, I think, something for to consider. Again, like I said at the beginning, from here, obviously looking for feedback. I see this as a really a draft. Getting some additional pieces put into it. Once it's in a, better place, building out some, kind of some flow charts, so to speak, as far as where some of these processes are gonna kind of move through, where some of the decision trees are gonna look, some of the decision trees are gonna look like, when things will route back, et cetera, fine tuning that a little bit. But at least this gets a conversation moving as far as how we should potentially consider operating.
Awesome.
It feels like the couple of things then that might be tangible next step would be precisely what you just described, someone developing a flow chart that identifies the decision points and something that we can work from, and then maybe also developing the draft of an intake document.
Yeah.
If those two things would be very significant if we got them done.
So I think being able to do the flow charts is fairly easy once the process is in a good spot. I mean, if everybody feels comfortable with this, I can tweak it some more and put it into something like that. That's pretty straightforward.
And it will show any weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't see as this or anything that even gets developed in the next stage would be by no means perfect. And still open for feedback and figuring out how things need to adjust, and then when we look at, the processes on, how do we take things from, idea, processing it here, within the CEC, and then going, okay, now we've got our piece kind of solidified. Now we need to take it to city staff and start those conversations. What does that look like? And where's their decision tree? So that would be helpful from Mark and David. I figured out, okay, now we've got, these things, whatever they may be, widgets, and we got to figure out how we're going to take these widgets, put them together in a process that's going to work with city staff or city council, and then, being able to push things out to the community from that point. So,
I think the best way to, I thought this was good.
Yeah.
I really did. The draft, only way we can, I think, flush, like you said, sort of get this more in a granular form, like what you were talking about, is to actually have a project.
Mhm.
And take it through the test file.
Mhm.
That's the best way to do it.
Well, and we could even do,
I mean,
we could create a mock project
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
so that we
We
take it,
create a mock project.
Summer's Girl Scout troop comes in.
It's just gonna get the priority.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna fight over it.
Yeah.
You know, comes up with a great idea to build bunkhouses in Pavilion Park. Cause that sounds like fun.
Yeah, can we get it done? It's the priority.
So
Wasn't
I'm-
that kind of a conflict with the camping ordinance?
Is it camping if it has four walls?
Parks and Arts.
It's Parks and Arts, there we go. So yeah, no, I think we could, you know, take a project.
Yeah.
You know,
Because that's the only
and
way
run it
that,
through it,
yeah, build a consensus and, or get some granular specifics on here, instead of, let's do a one project and think about that, and how do we go through this?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and I could have a whole subcommittee meeting anytime on it. But I think some places where we talk about, well, first of all, where you mentioned, alignment with city management or city council priorities. I think also adding like whatever abilities and realities, whatever that is, because I think we keep being faced with that sort of same thing. Priorities and abilities and realities seem to not always match up here. So,
resources. kind of
yeah, so
thing.
whatever that looks like, right? And then funding, whether it's something that is specifically had a proposed funding or is undecided. And I just think that the more upfront we are about that piece, even for ourselves, for anyone who's taking the survey, et cetera, I think there's a lot of confusion when people are answering surveys, because, I mean, when I'm talking to people, they have maybe one opinion, but they really think that the money's coming out of taxes or this or that, or whatever, so I
No,
think
it's
it can
really-
be, even if we don't know what that is, right? Just saying potential sources or proposed sources are undecided. And then, yeah, I would be excited for you to do an intake form or whatever we're gonna call that for each proposed thing. And then, I know, Robin with her giant charts and me with my binder. But I think if we could have individual sheets for each thing as a sort of intake form, and then an overall, whatever that is, so we can cross-reference some of this stuff, so that we can say, hey, you know, dog park got 50 of the votes out of the 20 question thing on this date. Came up again, got 10 votes, came up again, got 2 votes, came up next, you know, whatever it is, so we can just have some sort of cross-referencing of the data we already have in every conversation that we're proposing something. And I think just a real good tracking of, when, these things have, you know, just the timeline of when these things have happened, right? So it's something that's been proposed in the past. When was the last time that they came to city council officially with it? How long has this idea been going around? I think that would answer a lot of our questions too. And, so again, I'm kind of into a living document, multi-project data piece of this also. And I only see 2 things, right? Like the individual project and the overall thing, which is,
Yeah.
you know, covers everything, I guess. And then a place within this for supporting documents, whether that's, you know, in the dog park thing, the pictures of the maps or whatever it is, right? Whether it's a link to those things, maybe it's something that's up on Zense, whatever that is, but just some piece for supporting documents for that.
Well, that would aid in the information sharing
Sure.
as we review information and say, okay, we're gonna share this with, you know, Mark and his team, so that we can set up a meeting, so we need to wait for them to be able to access
Mhm.
all the information that they live there.
Mhm. I'm just seeing that a lot of it might be shared
Yeah.
stuff, so we might, you know, use some apps for this and some for the other thing, that kind of thing. And then just real clear about what, if there's any actions or upcoming votes or anything like that on these things. So maybe there's that other type of priority, which is some actual timeline priority if something's already on the docket somewhere. So differentiating our strategic priorities that we've deemed as priorities versus actually chronological. That's it. But yeah, I love this. Great, thank you.
Cool.
That kind of thing, yeah, this is good. A good route, yeah.
I really am excited to get to work. I think this is exciting. I am very interested to see proposals come and where they're gonna come from. And I think that's my biggest part for me is like, when you talk about areas of concern, like, can you give me an example of like what that might be? If somebody has a complaint, is that something that they're gonna come to us with?
I hope not.
That sounds like.
I think I put that in there as kind of like a, more so as like a catch-all for things that aren't necessarily specific projects, but things that might come up for us to potentially have. And I would see those things that would likely lead to conversations with city staff, likely to start. You know, I could see potentially maybe safety things that come up, weird things that come up with farmers market. You know, I think that's kind of falls into that bucket, because there were always some sort of comments about individual needs that people identified that might be part of a greater community concern, right? But that's the one individual that voiced it. Okay, cool, so they voiced it, it's valid. Now, where do we take it? And that's, I think right now we don't have a good mechanism for that. Right?
No, we do not at all.
And so this would be able to take that, and it's not necessarily that something that would turn into a full-blown project, going back to Bill's point, but something that would be like, okay, we've got a nugget, it's a need, and somebody who's very passionate about that need. Where can we redirect that to that makes the most sense? And more often than not, it's gonna be, a gift over to city staff at Christmas. And, and then the response is gonna, be, very factual and saying, hey, yeah, it is a need, and it's on our list. It's, like, the weird stoplights. The one thing that always came up at, farmers market that always cracked me up, it was always the road that's not in Liberty Lake proper, right? It's a county road. And they're always like, why doesn't the city do anything about it? Well, it's not a city road, it's the county. Those are the things that are always like, you get these weird little one-offs, some of which are gonna fall into a totally different jurisdiction, some of which might be actionable for the city, and some of which the city may be already taking action on. But at least if we have a mechanism of moving it through, that can help here. Okay.
I do think that this is an area that is especially susceptible to mission creep. And we nowhere is our work defined as that of an ombudsman. And so, we have city council, or city councilmen that get paid the big bucks. And those, I can see a lot of things without, if the information comes to us because of surveys that we're doing.
Right.
I can imagine that there are things that we would just treat like a hot potato and not even presume to do research unless we were tasked.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Give it to the people who are the problems.
Yeah, no, I think there's always gonna be things like that. If you think about like when we were doing the ARPA survey questions, I mean, how many of those were actually likely to be things that we as CDC would have investigated or done some sort of expanded survey on? Very few. Most of those things were like, okay, more police funding. Well, hey, city council, city staff, that's on you to figure out because somebody, said a stoplight somewhere, right? Not something we would investigate, right? But something that would turn over to, the city from a staff and a council standpoint saying, hey, I'm getting consistent feedback about it, but it's not something that we would investigate, right? So, yeah.
And there's just that area too, is doing full circle and accountability and getting back with the people, or for the stuff that, this is how we're resolving, here.
Yeah, I think that I touched on that briefly in kind of this process, but I think.
Yeah, I
think it needs to be defined better as far as how the end results of whatever survey are communicated. If we're leading that project and what that looks like and how that, final report is disseminated. And what format makes the most sense. And I think in some of these, it'll be like on a case by case basis, like some may require, a varied style of report to be able to be presented per council, and maybe that's where it kind of ends. And then maybe some of these are things where it's like, hey, this is really cool information. Let's build a small infographic out of it and dump it out to the city residents and say, hey, look at this. This is really cool. This is some great information. Like, you should be proud of X, Y, or Z that's taking place here. The things you could celebrate, right? Because those are things that a lot of times get missed. Like, the city staff work hard. They don't get pat on the back much. It's like, so it's like, hey, city staff, look what they did this year. Look at the things that, I saw, what was it? The thing that Canisius posted about, or somebody posted about the thing, the incident responses and things. It's like things like that residents can respond to. It's not necessarily actionable, but it's informative, and it's digestible in a way that can be meaningful. It's like I can take in 5 or 10 facts. I can't take in 5 or 10 pages. I don't want to take in 5 or 10 pages most days, but I can take 5 or 10 facts in.
Yeah.
I have a great capacity for that. So that's where I'm at.
So I guess the next question is, I like these ideas. Look at that, Mark and David, do we have a project we can put it through the test and put it through your eyes?
It may be your next agenda. item. There's a reference to, there was a reference to a mock project, but we do have a potential of a mark project.
Oh, okay,
You may want to wrap up your discussion here before
okay,
merging onto that.
yeah.
Before you
Yeah.
expire.
And I just want to commend Aaron, this is a nice little thing you whipped up on your lunch hour.
Yeah.
You did a lot of thinking on this.
I've been noodling on this for a while. It was nice to be able to put it down, honestly, and I think, I hope it helps long term. I think, and no matter where the commission goes, in subsequent years, these are things I feel like should be treated as living documents. I mean, every time we pull it out and we use it for a project, we should go, okay, well, hey, we did the Mark project. What did not work in the process? Because the first time through, there's gonna be a lot of things to be like, okay, that was quirky, that was uncomfortable, that didn't feel right or fit. Let's learn from it and do it better. And so what can we do to adjust? And so I think, especially in those first probably year or so of you doing this, it's gonna be a lot of, okay, that was the idea didn't work, let's tweak it and make it better. And maybe each commission ends up in a place where, like, if Parks and Arts comes to us, maybe their process looks different than if city comes to us or if city council comes to us. Things will adjust based on what we're actually, how it actually ends up working. So, to kind of close, just back to Dave's point, so I'll work on a draft proposal template, and then build out a couple of flows with this, and then we can look at that at the next meeting. and
Yeah,
Go from there.
but let's put that on for the
Mhm.
next agenda item, because one of the things that we're looking at, is we can spend our time planning now, sort of that whole farmer's market thing is now over with, and now we can spend our time planning, getting ready
Yeah.
for the proposals that will be coming forward.
Yeah.
For next year.
Sounds good.
Aaron, do you want to have, if anybody has suggestions, you want them to funnel it through me?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, they can, if
Or
you want,
direct?
they can, if you've got feedback on whatever's written here, or if there's things I've missed, Mark, if you've got feedback, feel free to send it. I'm happy to take it. Be able to figure out how to incorporate it into here. So, this is truly a draft. I'm looking for feedback. I want to make sure this fits, as much as possible, right? Everybody's kind of, idea and ideal as far as how we build this out. So yeah, if you got feedback, just send it over, and then I can incorporate it over the next couple of weeks, and then build out that proposal template with it as well. But this truly was meant to be an initial draft for feedback. Absolutely. So yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Onward.
Mark,
All right, thanks, Robin. So I'm gonna try to take as little time as possible, and I can assure you that, Aaron and I did not collaborate. But this, what I'm gonna brief is got a very strong dovetail with what you've just heard. It doesn't fit fully into the full scope of this, this guidance, but there's enough of an overlap where this may be a meaningful test case. I do advocate though for a test project that goes end to end, right? That meets all of these variables that you've identified at some point, whatever that ends up looking like. But with respect to the strategic plan, it's very important, that staff, for the sake of the community, for us to understand what the results that we're producing against the strategic plan priorities are and how they're being perceived throughout the community. And so what you'll see when the plan is adopted is somewhere between 10 and 15 results, being, key pieces of things that we're going to keep track of that are going to be our accountability measures. Now, we're going to keep track of more than those 15 things, but in terms of the plan specific things that we're going to hold ourselves accountable for at the council level and the public level, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15. Of those, probably half are going to, the only way that we're going to be able to know if we're moving the needle is to survey. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put together a community survey. The only way that we're going to be able to do that efficiently and within a cost-effective manner is to do it by household. It's going to be statistically significant. So we're going to hit that 420-ish number that you've identified here. The survey is already designed largely. I would like to get the, whether it's a subcommittee or the full commission, I would like to get your input on the survey, but not from a design perspective per se, from here's what we're trying to accomplish so that you can help formulate a outreach education effort. Because this is, to answer one of Bill's previous questions, this is probably going to be on the order of magnitude of 100 question survey. In total, this is going to be mailed out to specific randomized, and that's how you get statistical validity, is randomizing the sample. And so, and that's another area where I'm going to need the commission's input, is how to achieve that. Number one, how to get the data required for the 4,200 households in order to be able to randomize 420 sample size. Our target for doing this, at least for sending this out, is going to be January of 2024, and the results of this are going to serve as the baseline for the future years. And so, for example, one of the strategic priorities that council is going to adopt in the plan is quality of life. And so one of the results associated with that is going to be something to the effect of people feel better about their quality of life every year, right? Something like that. Well, you can't get a sense of how people feel about their quality of life with one question, right? It takes a series of questions, very scientifically designed, so that you can have a comprehensive understanding of all of the variables that go into quality of life, and then measure that over time so you can see if you're making improvements or not making improvements, and if you're not, why. Do more resources need to go into area A, B, C, D, and so forth, right? Do we need to stop doing something, whatever? Those will be things that we have to evaluate as we get results. But for the first go around, which the target would be getting it out sometime in January, what I really need the commission to put some thought into is how to help us get the word out, to have a general awareness throughout the community that this is going to be happening, number one. And then specifically for those 420 households, we really need you to participate in this so that we have a valid, statistically valid set of data. And to Aaron's point, once we get the data, then we'll come back to the commission and we'll want to do some analysis, right? Does the age stratification match close enough with our census numbers to be valid, right? Have we introduced some kind of survey bias into that in our randomization or whatever, right? I mean, you can come up with all kinds of different things. And then creating a report that will go back to ultimately city council and the public. That's gonna be our measure of accountability as to how we're performing against the strategic plan. And so that's just a very brief, description that I'll call it a project. That survey effort fits very nicely. It dovetails very nicely with the process that Aaron just defined, although it doesn't check every box that's in there. But it checks enough of them where that can be a great test case, right? A get out of the gate kind of, let's test this and put it through its paces. And so I'll leave it there, allow you to ask any questions that you may have. And then for future discussions, future meetings of the commission and or a subcommittee, leave you to kind of start thinking about how to help on those two things that I mentioned, so.
So Mark, just so I'm clear, so, getting the word out to the people to be able to make sure that they're responding. And then, what was that first piece? That was something about the feedback on the survey, but it wasn't on the design side of things.
So on the front end, helping to define, helping to define how to access a data set that includes the 4,200 households, and then helping us define a randomization method.
Okay. Okay.
Let's have a quick question, Mark. So, you would like this to be launched on January 2024, correct?
That's the goal, yeah.
Okay, so then we would need to, we definitely need to get this on next month, the November and December agenda, so that we can put a process in place. I think trying to follow your steps, and what you wrote in the draft, and almost have for November and December, almost like it's a meeting, a large part of the work session too.
Well, I'll take a step back.
Okay.
I agree with you, but I think from a timeline standpoint, I think that's a piece of, so January is go day. How the survey's already developed, right?
In large part, yeah.
Okay, so survey's already developed. You already know how many households you're trying to reach. Those two key pieces of randomization method and what that's gonna look like. And then being able to gather the data from the households through census.gov or wherever else we can get it as far as the population to be able to figure out those random samples that we're gonna go pull. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I would lean towards, honestly, if to be able to move this forward and be expeditious, I would be less inclined to say, hey, wait till the next meeting. I'd be more inclined, can we get 2 or 3 of us and a small group to start working with Mark and his team to figure out these 2 or 3 different things, and then be able to come back to the commission meeting in November. Because I'm just trying to think, I'm just thinking through Thanksgiving. Christmas Eve. I mean, we're down, we're gonna lose 3 weeks, right? So I'm just trying to think through those things to make sure that we as a commissioner, as helpful as we can be to you guys in helping to find these pieces. And what that looks like. So that would be my initial reaction, be like, hey, I would love others to jump in here. I mean, I feel like this makes sense for us to engage in. And that's kind of, and then if the commission's comfortable with that, that would be my recommendation on next step, to say, let's get a couple of us to do that, because then honestly, going back to the pieces for me to present in November actually helps with that as well. Because now we're actually engaging city staff, so building up some of those other process flows in real time, so to speak, with some of these other pieces, so.
Okay, I think that makes sense, because we're gonna lose just the holidays alone, we're gonna lose some time.
Oh, we're gonna lose 3 weeks. I mean, of actual real,
And where launch is on January 2024, then we need to have something more concrete.
yeah, I mean, I think most likely, if you're trying to launch January 24, you really need, ideally, probably the populations, the samples, all that stuff determined before the end of the year. Working backwards is ideally,
Ideally, yeah.
I mean, but if it's beginning of January, you know, it's not gonna make a huge difference, but ideally, from a timeline standpoint, if you're trying to do that, that's where my head would go, is to have everything buttoned up before you guys close up for the holidays.
So, agree, from a surveying standpoint, the middle of January is like the sweet spot for surveying, because everybody's over the holidays, they're getting back in the groove, they're, you know, they're ready for that kind of thing, and so that, somewhere between that second and third week of January would be ideal, you know, we can obviously push that out if we need to, but that's the ideal spot, so that's what
Okay.
we'd be trying to hit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who do you want, Aaron, on the subcommittee?
Whoever would like to, I would love to do it, I mean, of course, but whoever else would like to jump on,
Okay,
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
okay. Cynthia, and then
do
Aaron.
you wanna hop on?
I do.
mean, Mark, our meetings only take place at Starbucks.
And under 44 minutes. Not 45.
I just suggest like a speakeasy somewhere or something.
Oh, I'm done with that. Okay, all right,
Is
so
Agreeable with everybody?
do we need a motion addition on that?
Do we need a motion?
I would guess if somebody just wants to volunteer, that's good, we'll
Okay.
take it down.
I think.
Okay,
I think that if everybody's in agreement.
And we need
And
to
in
keep
the
it to no
meantime,
more than
everyone wants
three.
to-
that's what I was gonna, because we won't be we want to form 3, right?
Right.
Okay, so
So who's doing this?
Cynthia, Summer, and I. So, Mark, why don't you look at your schedule, email us, and then we can figure out an initial meet. Probably makes the most sense, just to kind of debrief with, whether it's you and a couple of your other staff members, or maybe it's just with you. And then, figure out what pieces make sense for us to tackle and take on, and what resources you have, what we need to look for. I have a couple in mind, of people I can reach out to as well to help with that too, so.
Sounds good, I'll get that out sometime this week.
Sounds good.
Okay. Item number C under discussions and business, is this something that we'd like to discuss now, or can we basically table this until the November meeting? It's something we have time to table, I'm just taking us time right now, be respectful of everybody's time, it's 7:15.
Well, is this just you guys needing to resubmit, or is this?
This item refers to the chairs, it doesn't refer to those whose terms are ending.
Okay. Okay,
And
so
I would
there's
just
chair and
recommend-
vice terms for sharing, it's ending, so that's what we need.
I would just recommend that some action be taken before December, just in case we don't have a quorum in December, then we're kind of stuck for January. It can be acted on tonight, it can be acted on next
I vote for tabling it
Okay.
up to November, it's 7:15, I know everybody has.
Robin's got somewhere to go.
month. And that way everybody knows there's gonna be a vote at that meeting too.
So vote for chair, vice chair. On that meeting.
And for those of you who weren't here the first time, it was pretty loosey-goosey. It wasn't, there were not official campaigns made. It was kind of some people hid under the desk, other people pointed at other people, kind of a thing. Just, but I mean, I'm not dissuading you from putting up signs in people's yards or on city property, but
Do they need an official motion to table that?
No, please, no.
Just make it into.
So, anybody wanna make a motion to,
We need to make a motion?
No,
Oh, okay.
We don't?
Then we don't, okay.
you go, Rita.
we don't have to make a motion? Okay. And then how about the 6D Farmers Market 2023 wrap-ups? I'd like to table that and put it on November agenda. And
Or
then-
even February.
Yeah, we could even, yeah, we
June tenth of next year.
we could even extend that one. And then the date, be thinking on the date of December 2023 meeting, it's currently scheduled for December the 20th. And if we need to change that or not, table that and put it on November meeting.
Well, that's a good one to figure out, though. I mean,
Okay,
who else is?
Well, we
Mark's
don't-
not Here,
we don't have Jennifer, we don't have Mark, so.
yeah.
I haven't sat down with my December calendar yet.
So let's put it on the meeting for November, and we just have to make a decision, so.
Okay, November. And that's CED, other upcoming community engagement opportunities.
I think we covered that.
I think we covered that.
Okay.
So I think we have our requested items for our agenda for the next month. As we went through our meeting today, we talked and said, let's look at this for the next month. Primarily continuing on the framework and then these items that we tabled.
You'll probably want to include an item for the subcommittee to brief. the
Yeah.
commission.
That's right, thank you.
Yeah.
Subcommittee, briefing.
What day is that, November one?
So that next meeting is gonna be November 15th, 2023.
Do we want to plan for a longer meeting? Hour and a half instead of an hour?
Okay. We,
I would just see that, I mean, because if we're gonna do a subcommittee, I'm gonna go through stuff. We're gonna have to vote. And then we're an hour and a half now,
we are, and we,
and I'm just trying to,
I
like, at
think
least.
that's a really good idea, is like, let's go for it, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Everybody's agreeable to that. Okay, hour and a half, started 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Anything else for the good of people? Okay, if not, meeting's adjourned.